key words would be, I think. What do you think? Is it pretty? Is it a weed or a flower? Let's say you cut it down and 5 seconds later you get a knock at the door. Go to answer it. It's your next door neighbor. They invite you over for some coffee. You walk over, grateful because you have no caffeine in your house that morning, and run outside in the backyard, and what do you see? But a wall-to-wall, yard-to-yard long daisy garden. And your neighbor starts to tell you about every breed and variety and genus and species of daisy in the garden, and not only are you suddenly aware of where that daisy might have come from, but maybe you missed out. We are all absolutely irreplaceable, utterly unique, unrepeatable. You are the only you. I am the only me who ever was, is, or ever will be. We never, ever gave up, not that I remember anyway, gave up our right to decide what beauty looks like, walks like, talks like, acts like, feels like, lives like. But it does us no good until we claim it. And that's what this evening, that's what our life is about. If we think it's beautiful, it is. If you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't see your unique beauty, then it is wasted. Because once you see it, everybody will too. Everybody can. Once I started seeing my unique beauty, everybody else started seeing it too, because I started being willing to share it. Very, very important transition that not enough of us take the time to make. Now, of course, we've got all kinds of other data that's very helpful to us when we're making this decision. For instance, Glamour magazine, which is a very statistically sound, scientifically researched publication. We know that we can trust everything that we read in Glamour, right? And they did a readers poll a couple years ago. They asked their readers, if you had a choice, if you could be Heidi Klum, have her body, but die at 40, or be morbidly obese but live to be 100, which one would you choose? So, by a show of hands, how many of you would prefer to have your dream body? Guys, you can substitute. Maybe Brad Pitt and Troy or something like that. But how many of you would like to have your dream body, and you'd be willing to die at 40, as opposed to the alternative? Okay. How many of you would prefer to be morbidly obese but get to live to be 100? Okay. How many of you would prefer another alternative, maybe something in the middle? Right? But that doesn't sell anything. Certainly doesn't sell magazines. So that's not an option that we were given. Now, let's take a look and see what the readers said. 81% of Glamour readers decided they would prefer to shave off 30 to 40 years of their lifespan to have their goal body. 9% decided they'd rather be morbidly obese and live to be 100. 10% were obviously either at the beach reading through a different magazine or wisely abstaining, not liking their options. This is what we're faced with. Girls 11 to 17 internationally, when polled, prefer to be stupid, paraplegic, or run over by a truck. Always one of my favorite things to do when I have a free day, right? Then be fat. When was the last time you heard about a fourth grader who said, my thighs are fat? You're in fourth grade. You don't have thighs. Boys, age 11 to 17, when given a composite of images with ideal physical shape and size, universally, 100% of them chose a physical ideal for themselves that was only achievable by the use of steroids. 80% of fourth graders, males and females, fear getting fat, whatever that means, more than their parents' death, their own death, or the threat of nuclear war. 40% of fourth graders, the ones that have no thighs, have already been on a diet. This is the beauty that's probably like one generation before me, the 1950s. You have Bridget Bardot, Marilyn Monroe, Mae West, Marlene Dietrich, voluptuous, sensual beauty. 1950s and earlier, really up till 1959. This is beauty today. Let's take a look at that one more time. This is beauty up till about 1959. This was the standard of beauty that our culture adhered to. This is beauty today. Now, you cultural anthropology and sociology majors, maybe biology, maybe you can weigh in on this. Is this some kind of Darwinian evolutionary mechanism? Has our DNA just started to tick backwards? We're just shedding the pounds as we travel further and further towards the 22nd century? Or is this a calculated marketing ploy designed to sell $60 billion worth of products and services to us each year? We can make up our minds. How many of you are in psychology or sociology classes? I visited one of your classes today. How many of you have ever heard of Dr. Watson? Dr. John B. Watson had a rather colorful career. John B. Watson, I'm all about mentoring, right? So John B. Watson has a mentor. When he's in university, when he's a teacher, he has a mentor, and his mentor likes to have a little fling here and there. So John, Mr. Watson, he decides, well, geez, my mentor does it. I can certainly get away with it, even though I'm married. They'll look the other way. So he goes out and locates his very attractive research assistant and proceeds to have a little affair. And finds out that his university isn't quite as tolerant as he was hoping for. And they axed his butt. Of course, his wife is understandably ticked off, so she divorces him. So he decides to marry the grad assistant. They start having babies, and he's got no job. He looks around, he says, where can I put to use all of my years of study and application of classical conditioning principles? Aha! I'll go work for J. Walter Thompson, the largest ad agency in the country. I will teach them how to tie their consumers up like puppets and yank the strings. That sounds like fun. And that's exactly what he did. Now, I find it interesting that it must have been somewhat more than uncomfortable living in the Watson household, probably like being a lab rat, because several of his own children tried to commit suicide, and some of them actually succeeded. But this is his famous quote: if you want to make your consumer react, tug at his emotional heartstrings, tie him up with rage. Call it a love response. We'll see a little bit about that later. This is a learned art, the advertising and the marketing that we're exposed to. In 1960, a new breed of supermodel was born. How many of you have ever seen America's Top Model and you saw Twiggy? She doesn't look like Twiggy anymore, does she? If I plucked this little 14-year-old girl out of Great Britain, she couldn't gain weight if her life depended on it. Her mother had taken her to every doctor in London and England. She ate anything she wanted, and she couldn't gain weight. You know, and basically the classical conditioning principle behind this is that about 96 to 98% of the population has no genetic ability to look like Twiggy. But if we make them want to and make them think that they can, then they're going to buy a whole heck of a lot of products and services from us. Clothing, diet products, hair care, anything, blenders. Because if we can sell them on the idea that buying a blender is going to make them look like Twiggy, and she's the new cultural standard of beauty, we're going to make a heck of a lot of money. Now, when Twiggy was interviewed and asked how she felt about being the new international standard, and asked her what she thought about her figure, she said, well, I wouldn't really call it much of a figure, would you? I want to look like Brenda Lee, curvy. Now, here's Brenda Lee in the middle here. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Does Twiggy not look like a younger, thinner version of Brenda Lee? About 30 pounds thinner. There is nothing left to chance in this world that we live in. This is all part of The grand plan